Thank you very much. I am Victor Hortado, and I am an art history major undergraduate with a minor in national security studies. In the community, I'm involved in historic preservation, where I advocate for the preservation of our architectural patrimony in downtown El Paso. Reflecting my international interest, I became very interested in preserving culture and protecting culture at the global scale. So I embarked on this research sponsored by the Curie Emeritus Program and supported and mentored by Dr. Damien Van Puevel. So I do want to thank the National Security Studies Institute, Director of the National Security Studies Institute, Larry Valero, Dr. Stephen Coulthard, and I also want to thank my art history faculty, Dr. Max Grossman and Professor Ann Perry, for their invaluable support and mentorship throughout my undergraduate studies. So throughout this academic school year, I've been conducting research on the destruction of cultural heritage in the Middle East, particularly orchestrated by the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, also known as Daesh. I'm indeed involved in historic preservation, but reflecting my international interest, again, I became very interested in this topic. Since the onset of the Syrian civil war in 2011, ISIS and other armed groups began attacking deliberately and systematically and tactically attacking architectural monuments that attest to millennia of historical development in one of the culturally richest parts of the region and in the world, in the Middle East. Of course, most of the public debate in national security studies has focused largely on terrorism, military intervention, and human security. What ISIS is also doing, besides committing atrocious acts such as raping, killing, assassinating, taking people hostage, they're also destroying beautiful architectural monuments. Daesh destroys, not only targets humans, but also mistreats, destroys, plunders, loot, and emphatically profits from the sale of humanity's shared past. In 2015, Daesh destroyed several key monuments in the ancient city of Tadmor, or Palmyra, Syria. They razed the temple of Baal Shemin, a beautiful temple which was created in the 2nd century AD to honor a sacred saint named Baal in Syria. They also razed the triumphal arch, which was created to commemorate the victory over the Parthians, the Roman victory over the Parthians in the 2nd century CE. Palmyra had for long been a crossroads of trade, where East met West in the ancient world. Palmyra for long had been dubbed the Venice of the Sands and was the center of cosmopolitanism and diversity. Nevertheless, ISIS destroyed this monument based on their concept of shirk, or idolatry, and in defiance of international values, and destroyed this beautiful UNESCO World Heritage Site, immediately sparking international outrage. UNESCO and many other news media outlets released numerous reports condemning this destruction, calling it an attack on all of humanity. And of course, this facilitated the distribution of Daesh's propaganda, which is one of the rationales that I'm examining. In releasing these numerous media reports, they did facilitate in the distribution of ISIS propaganda by sending it all over the world. After jihadists took Palmyra, they also came back for a second time and destroyed 2 more monuments in 2016 after they took the city from the Russian and Syrian armies. Jihadists conducted a second wave of destruction in what seemed to be a power move, and in order to divert attention from territorial losses all over the Middle East. In summer 2016, they destroyed the Roman theater right here, and of course you see before the destruction, and then they destroyed the proscenium, or the backdrop of the Roman amphitheater, and then they went ahead and destroyed the tetrapylon over here. Destroyed this beautiful site that was the terminus of the ancient Roman colonnaded walkway. One of those columns was in its original Egyptian granite, and it destroyed. Went ahead and destroyed that in 2016. Most chillingly, they beheaded killed and hung the body of Khaled al-Assad in the entrance of Tadmor in order to intimidate the local population and to alert other people to not be venerating and protecting these sites. He was allegedly killed because he refused to reveal the location of several ancient antiquities. Further, reports indicate that jihadists conducted executions in the Roman amphitheater, which in fact, according to several historians, links human security to the need to protect cultural heritage during armed conflict. Hence, cultural security, the protection of humans and its cultural byproducts, should devise ways to protect the deliberate targeting of culture, and also devise ways to ensure human security. Central to my research are the concepts of both cultural security and cultural heritage. But please let me define both concepts. Cultural heritage can be intangible or tangible heritage. Tangible heritage, on one hand, involves the architectural spaces, the built environment, and historical artifacts, things that are physically manifested. Intangible heritage, on the other hand, involves traditions, practices, customs, knowledge, rituals, even food, and what I really want to emphasize, language. Either or, cultural heritage matters as it unites people, builds a sense of community, reinforces community connections, and crystallizes societal fabric, and takes a role in the rebuilding phase post-conflict. We've seen this in Africa in 2000 and the 1990s, where there were wars, civil wars, and after that, men and women attempted to rebuild their communities to bring back the traditions that encompassed civil society. Cultural security then explores the power of cultural heritage in diplomacy and international affairs while attempting to shape the space in which art, culture, foreign policy, and security intersect. Back to the main subject of my study, Daesh does not make a distinction between heritage types, and in fact erodes both forms of cultural heritage. In doing so, they attempt to destabilize communities, disrupting societal fabric and imposing tyranny. For instance, in Malula, Syria, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the last places in the world where Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ, is continuously spoken, they decided to take 12 nuns hostage, targeted several Orthodox Christian churches, and many other convents in the city of Malula in 2013. Thus, the nuns were released unharmed, yet many Malula's residents are still missing. San Thekla is still a church where Aramaic is continuously recited and spoken. It was damaged by ISIS. And extremists also tried to burn and destroy the tomb of Saint Thekla. And Saint Thekla was a great saint who was persecuted by the Romans, and who was a follower of Saint Paul. Extremists deliberately destroy and tactically destroy churches, synagogues, mosques, which belong to Syria's and Iraq's religious minorities. This in violation of international humanitarian law and legal constructs. Yazidi, Christian, Shia, and Shia architectural spaces are particularly targeted. For instance, in Mosul, Iraq, Daesh destroyed the Christian site and shrine of the prophet Yonah, an important religious figure for the Christians and many other religious sects equal. In 2014, not long after the Daesh occupied the city, militants deliberately destroyed and leveled the shrine, leaving no trace of its medieval or modern architecture. And satellite imagery, courtesy of the American Schools for Oriental Research, confirms this destruction. My research then, and my central question then becomes, why does Daesh destroy these beautiful architectural assets? Sunni Daesh and militants attempt to erase the identity of the other, or anybody who does not conform to the strict interpretation of Sunni Islam. For Daesh, a mosque, a minaret, a church pinnacle, or any historic water wheel with which minority Shia Muslims identify with is indicative of the other's presence within the cultural landscape and must thus be erased in order to impose tyranny. In Robert Bevan's words, out of sight can literally mean out of mind. The exploration of the ideological rationale for the destruction of heritage is central to my research. And in this paper, we do explore the destruction of the rationales that guide and or justify it: ideology, propaganda, and funding. Destruction of cultural heritage is a pressing issue for those interested in culture, world history, and archaeology. Daesh threats to cultural security, however, are also relevant for national security professionals. Daesh uses propaganda to garner international attention, draw attention to the cause, suggest permanence, and exaggerate the perception of power. Videos of destructive malfeasance serve as propaganda which, at the international level, controls how Daesh is perceived abroad. In alignment with Daesh ideology, videos of destruction quote the Quran and reference Prophet Muhammad, and they may serve to inspire and recruit foreign fighters and raise HVEs, or homegrown violent extremists. Analyzing the role of heritage destruction in Daesh, quote-unquote, socially mediated terrorism, and devising ways to counter it must be in alignment with the Department of State's priority in countering extremist recruitment and neutralizing Daesh's narrative. In this case, foreign policy, art, culture, and security interrelate. Countering the mistreatment of cultural heritage is also a way to tactically sever terrorist funding. It is accepted by the heritage community that Daesh sells and traffics fragmentary ethnological and archaeological material to fund its terror campaign. In 2015, U.S. Special Forces raided the compound of Abu Sayyaf, a Daesh organizational leader, and found compromising evidence of Daesh's activities. Documentation suggests that Daesh has its own administrative office for the sale of artifacts. The Ministry of Antiquities, which resides under the Diwan, which is primarily concerned with the natural resources, does this in terms of trafficking and monitoring everything from issuing permits, identifying research in known sites, and excavating and trafficking the antiquities until they get to the international black market. Even though antiquities contribute to a smaller amount of funding when compared to other sources of revenue such as oil, theft, taxation, kidnapping, and extortion, it nonetheless is a significant source of wealth-generating material. In fact, Caldwell and Williams suggest that the lucrative trade of illicit cultural property ranks fourth in wealth-generating material for transnational criminal organizations amongst drugs trafficking and arms trafficking, petroleum, and human trafficking. Allegedly, Daesh collects tens of millions of dollars annually for the trade of antiquities, indicating this must not be viewed as a marginal source of funding. In my travels to Washington, D.C., I got to interview several cultural heritage professionals at the Smithsonian and from the University of Pennsylvania, facilitated by the National Security Studies Institute. And in there, several of those individuals claim that this might not be the case. In fact, we know that numbers or anything that can be based on antiquities trafficking are largely unverified and inflated numbers. But today, the modeling and antiquities trade in Iraq and Syria, the Mountis Project, and the University of Chicago is currently conducting a study to provide a reliable estimate of the value and scope of the antiquities trafficking for extremist groups in Iraq and Syria. To counter or curtail the destruction by ideology, for funding and or propaganda, numerous organizations have responded to the mistreatment of cultural heritage. This study attempts to answer the following question: to what extent have responses to destruction of cultural heritage by Daesh been successful? In answering this question, I will attempt to answer numerous other sub-questions indicated in this slide. To answer this question, my study principally relies on primary and secondary sources, open source material, such as government reports, academic literature, media reports, and semi-structured interviews, which I've already conducted in DC. Exploring Daesh motivations for destroying priceless heritage gives us a better understanding of the interrelation of culture and security affairs. In the current cultural crisis, numerous organizations have attempted to provide aid, yet cooperation amongst these groups is often challenging. Reactions by the international, national, and local heritage communities to address these rationale have been examined, and we found that reactions are limited in scope. For example, several mitigation projects have been conducted in Ma'ara, Syria, where individuals from the safeguarding the heritage of Iraq and Syria have sandbagged and even tried to save several mosaics in Ma'ara, Syria. Geospatial monitoring of sites is also a common characteristic, and so is site documentation, which can in fact be used later on, according to an academic at the University of Pennsylvania Cultural Heritage Center. He says that probably site documentation could be used later on to perhaps bring about tribunals in order to prosecute people for these crimes, which we have already seen during the Balkan Wars and even during World War II. Accountability in legal prosecution is slowly evolving from theory to practice, as a scholar from the UN has acknowledged. And one prime example of this is the prosecution of al-Faki al-Mahdi, an extremist affiliate who was prosecuted by the International Criminal Court for destroying several mausoleums in Timbuktu, Mali. So perhaps this could be used in Syria and Iraq, but of course we have many political constraints that prohibit this from happening. Cultural heritage represents humanity's shared past in the international values. The destruction thereof precludes our proper understanding of other people's cultural expressions. Cultural security advances foreign policy and diplomacy during military engagement by showing respect for foreign cultures and what people in a community individually value. Cultural heritage is the foundation of civil society and is rapidly disappearing due to armed conflict. This is our shared past, and it should behoove us all to become stewards of history and culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Victor. Next, we have Nicole Reese from the National Security Studies Institute.